Everyone. I see we already have at least 23 participants quite eager to get this conversation going. My name is Raquel Andreas and I will be moderating today's session. We've had quite the packed past week where we've had about three consultations actually, where we've touched on 4 different pillars so far of the Harambee Prosperity Plan. We started off with the effective governance pillar coupled with international relations, and then day 2 we went into economic advancement, and day 3 we touched on social progression. So today we have quite the jam-packed program lined up for you, and we will be tackling infrastructure development. So welcome once again to this youth consultations on the Harambee Prosperity Plan. Without wasting any more of your time, I'd like to give the opportunity to our convener, Ms. Desiree Matthias, the Presidential Advisor on Youth Matters and Enterprise Development, to just do the welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Raquel, and good morning to everybody. Welcome to the 3rd edition of the Office of the President Youth Engagement Forum, and also our final review and consultation session on the concluded Harambee Prosperity Plan, with a view to inform the policy framework for our reform and recovery agenda for HPPII, Government's Development Plan for the 2nd term. It has been a great joy to connect with all of you over the past few days since the 21st of September, and we have enjoyed every single session from the very first pillar. It has been an extremely rewarding, enlightening, and refreshing engagement, and we have no doubt that today we are going to finish strong. There has been so much diversity in the room. We have enjoyed the participation of young Namibians from the length and the breadth of the country, representing the full spectrum of our society. We have embraced the regions who invested the time and made the effort to connect and join and contribute towards this important dialogue. So first and foremost, we would like to say thank you. Thank you for accepting today's invitation. Thank you for accepting the time, for investing your time in this important policy consultation, which really is of national importance. This is very consistent to our President's development approach, which is always inclusive and a bottom-up planning approach. It's important for the development planning to be participatory, to be representative, and to be inclusive of all Namibians. As our president says, really no one should feel left out. I convey the greetings and the gratitude of His Excellency the President. He's aware that we've been going through this process of consultation, and he knows that today we are concluding our 5th pillar, and he looks forward to the outcomes of our exchanges here. We are honored to be joined on the call by senior government officials, and I would like to recognize the presence of my senior colleagues, the advisors to the President, Madam Ingedamwani Kamwi, Madam Penia Kwenye, and colleagues from government from the Ministries of Information, Communication and Technology, the National Planning Commission, and Ministry of Economic Planning. I also see that the turnout is rising very quickly, and I can see that today is going to be equally robust. A very good number of participants joining the call. We are focused today really to be keynote listeners, and we want to place emphasis on dialogue and a flow of ideas. So where there are specific questions that you want to direct to government, we encourage you to use the Q&A box so that we can respond directly to your questions, or on the chat room as well. And then we keep the floor time open to discussion. So a little bit of context why we are here. The Office of the President convenes on a quarterly basis these youth engagement forums. This is a request that you the young people, put to His Excellency the President during his 2019 town hall meeting at the NTN. And it is a request that has been accepted and effected to this end. We are on the 3rd edition, and it has been an exciting process of engagement and consultation to this end. Furthermore, in 2020, during the President's State of the Nation address on June the 4th of this year, the President committed to undertake this process of stakeholder consultation to review the concluded Harambee Prosperity Plan, which expired on the 20th of March 2020, and also to inform the framework for the next plan for the 2nd term. And this plan really will be a recovery and reform agenda. That exercise of consultation has commenced since July 2020, and it has been a broad consultative exercise where we have consulted intergovernmental officials, the private sector, academia, and different sectors and subject matter experts in our society. And of course, for the past 2 weeks, we've been speaking to ourselves as young people. It is important to note that governments reform and recovery agenda is rooted in the SWAPO Party's election manifesto, but it also onboards a lot of recommendations, such as the recommendations from the final report of the high-level panel on the Namibian economy, such as the APRM peer review mechanism on youth unemployment in Namibia, and a number of resource documents. So this process has been participatory, and it is really intended to strengthen our democratic engagement with institutions. And we have seen that over the last week. Young Namibians they form a large and an important stakeholder, and we believe that we should play a very central role in reviewing the progress that our country is making, but also in shaping our national development agenda, which impacts us not only today, but also our prospects for tomorrow. So we're here to shape tomorrow together. For those who may be less familiar with the Harambee Prosperity Plan, it is constructed on 5 pillars. And these 5 pillars, the president considers to be the critical success factors in our objective to create inclusive growth, shared prosperity, and sustainable development. The 5 pillars are effective governance as pillar 1, economic advancement, pillar 2, social progression, pillar 3, pillar 4, infrastructure development, and international relations as the last pillar. All of this is underpinned by strong monitoring and evaluation mechanisms to make sure that there's performance delivery on the desired goals and outcomes. So we have concluded 4 reviews of 4 pillars, which we've covered a significant amount of ground, but we've saved the best for last. Infrastructure development is our session for today, and you are aware that we can do nothing without the physical, human preconditions that connect us and enable us to either enterprise or to conduct our economic activity as efficiently and optimally as possible. So this is a key discussion that we look forward to today. And the turnout thus far is very encouraging. We want to craft this common agenda together as young people because of the shared destiny that we have, but also in acknowledgement that the world around us has changed so much. Not only has it changed during the past 4 years since the onset of the first Harambee Prosperity Plan, but the last 6 to 8 months have changed our lives profoundly. And we want to use this opportunity to reflect on the new perspectives that we have gained during these experiences, and let these relevant experiences inform how our country responds to the new emerging challenges and anticipated future challenges. That's why this conversation is so important with the young people, because we have been disproportionately affected, and we are predominantly the intended beneficiary and collaborator and in the implementation of these plans. So let us consider what has worked for us, what is no longer working for us, and what the new ideas and emerging issues are that need to be considered going forward for the second term. Our commitment to you is that our single-minded objective is to mainstream the issues that are affecting us as young Namibians and to place due emphasis on them and policy priority in government's development agenda for the second term. We intend for these exchanges to be meaningful. It's not just give us your ideas and we walk away. We really intend to mainstream them and to ensure that they are reflected as far as feasible in national policy formulation. Finally, we will also provide feedback through a validation process, because this is a consensus building exercise and we need to agree amongst ourselves on what the priorities are, and that date will be communicated on when we will conduct the final validation. It is tentatively the 30th of September, but we will confirm that date, because when we validate, we don't only validate the framework as young people, but it's a cross-validation by all the sectors of that concerned sectors that have been consulted, including in government, business, academia, and other members of our community and society. So with those few remarks, we look forward to today's exchange again and to receiving your ideas, thoughts, contributions, and experiences. Moderator, I yield the floor back to you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Matthias, for that opening remarks. I'd like to remind the participants to please let us know where they are tuning in from. Number one, it would be nice to give you a shout out. And then number two, I think for reporting purposes, it would be very useful to have an idea as to where our participants are tuning in from. And then we'll have an idea in terms of future consultations, where to prioritize in terms of making sure that we get more people, more young people especially, to join in on this type of consultations. With that said, we will go to our first presenter, Mr. Panashe Daringo. He is representing the Construction Industries Federation to present to us today. Panashe, I'm not clear if you are comfortable with sharing your screen on your own, or should we provide some assistance?
Good morning, Raquel. Let me try and share it and see if it goes through.
Okay. You won. Okay, I think yeah, you may go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to be sharing with you some views on the Harambee Prosperity Plan 2 and some reviews on Harambee Prosperity Plan 1. I'd like to basically observe the protocol that was previously established. And hopefully we can have an interesting discussion around the infrastructure pillar under the theme crafting a common youth agenda. So if we start off by asking ourselves, what is the Harambee Prosperity Plan? Well, it's built on the premise of the Namibian House. The Namibian House having 5 pillars, being social progression, international relations, economic advancement, effective governance, and the one which we're going to focus on today is infrastructure development. So the big question is, why infrastructure development, and why would infrastructure have its own pillar? Well, for infrastructure, it's important to understand that effective transport infrastructure is the backbone of a vibrant economy. Namibia's geographic location is prime to establish itself as the logistics hub for Africa, basically. Good infrastructure is also a key enabler for economic growth, and it attracts investments and promotes business expansion. Good infrastructure facilitates trade between countries and nations. It also enhances technological advancements and productivity, and is critical to drive economic growth and recovery for sustainable development. So if we look at the infrastructure pillar, it basically has 4 sub-pillars, which are energy, which has got 4 outcomes, water, which has got 2 desired outcomes, transport, which has got 4 desired outcomes, and ICT, which has got 5 desired outcomes. For this particular presentation, we're going to focus on the water and the transport sub-pillars. The other 2 are going to be covered by Ms. Nashilongo during her presentation. So ultimately, under the infrastructure sub-pillar, there's 15 desired outcomes or 15 targets that were set up under Harambee Prosperity Plan 1. So the big question is, how did we perform against these various sub-pillars? So if we look at the establishment of the Cabinet Committee on Water Management, that was successfully implemented in July 2016. The implementation of a national water resource management system wasn't, however, successfully implemented, although concentrated efforts were done on this. The Windhoek Aquifer Recharge Program was successfully implemented, and so was the completion of the Neckartal Dam earlier this year. If we move up, the development of a 25 million cubic meter desalination plant is well at advanced stages from a feasibility point of view, and was slightly delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And bringing industries closer to water resource was started, but was not actually successfully implemented. If we move up towards the irrigation infrastructure and the maintenance of the existing infrastructure, that was successfully completed. along with the expansion and the deepening of the Walfish Bay Port and the Windhoek to Okahanja dual carriageway that was successfully started and is currently underway. The upgrade of the Karibib-Usako-Swakopmund Road was unfortunately, however, suspended due to a moratorium on projects. And the Swakopmund Henties Bay Kamanyab Road has successfully started. This is a 92-kilometer section of a road, along with the Swakopmund to Walfish Bay dual carriageway, which is currently underway. They're currently busy with phase 2. The Walfish Bay Kransberg to Tsumeb Railway Road has actually started. This project is being financed by the African Development Bank and is commenced successfully. However, the upgrading of the Sanderweg Railway Road hasn't started. Neither has the commuter rail between Windhoek and the Katutura suburbs, nor the Windhoek to Rehobot. These projects have got a moratorium and hanging due to fiscal constraints. If we look at the construction of the Awas to Lutherits Railway, this also hasn't started. However, the Hosea Kutako upgrade to a category 4 has commenced and is successfully on track. The rehabilitation of the Eros runway hasn't started. This is to upgrade the VIP terminal. However, the commencement of the Machapa runway in the Katima Mulilo has commenced and is at an advanced stage, is almost complete. So if we look at an overview broad dashboard on how the scoring was on the infrastructure pillars, on energy, we scored 50%. On ICT, we're 60%. At transport, we scored 15%. And under water management, we scored an astonishing 100% of the desired outcomes. So in total, of the 15 desired outcomes, 10 of them are well on track or complete. However, 5 of them are slightly behind. And this gives us a 67% score on the HPPII infrastructure pillar. So if we look at sort of where we are and we ask ourselves, what are the big wins against this pillar? In a nutshell, we're able to increase the local electricity generation capacity from 400 megawatt to 600 megawatt, which gives us a current electricity consumption or usage of 624 megawatt. We were also able to increase the water consumption, which is pure clean for human consumption, to 94% from 50%. And our road network was increased by 1,192 kilometers, which are either bitumen upgrades or brand new roads that were built during the Harambee Prosperity Plan period. So these are quite astonishing achievements for the country, given the difficult times that we found ourselves in, especially at the last sector or the last part of the period. As we transition from Harambee Prosperity Plan 1 towards 2, it's important to take cognizant of the changed climate that we find ourselves in. So as we move towards an inclusive Namibian house, it's important to take note of some of the changes that have happened, some of which are COVID, some of which are economically linked. And it's also key to be aware of some of the potential pitfalls that would face as we develop this plan. So if we look at the previous plan, the biggest challenge that we had is a funding issue. A lot of the shortcomings were due to moratoriums or limited funding that was available for some of the projects. So it's important that we develop effective ways to finance and fund these projects to ensure infrastructure development. A second key potential pitfall is asset management. So currently under government, we have in excess of 10 billion assets under government management. However, the maintenance and operation of these assets is somewhat poor in some cases, and an effective and a more efficient way to manage government assets is needed to ensure that these assets are able to deliver on the services that are required. If we look at another potential pitfall, it's the exclusion of young people in the mainstream activities of the youth of the infrastructure pillar. So infrastructure is generally very capital intensive, and there's a big barrier for young people to either start businesses in the infrastructure space, and it's also linked to a limited capital component. So there aren't any active, intentional youth programs that are dedicated to young people in infrastructure. And this is obviously a major pitfall, and it speaks directly into this program. The last one is legislation. So we've got wonderful acts in Namibia, we've got wonderful laws. However, the construction industry is not regulated. For the last couple of years, we've been trying to get a National Construction Council established. Having this body allows one to grow gradually in the construction and in the infrastructure space. Additionally, we've got a wonderful Public Procurement Act, but it's not effectively utilized to ensure that dedicated individual groups are monitored and preferred. So the use of preferential treatment for some of these projects would be key, and if it's not addressed, could be a potential pitfall. So if we move forward and we try and understand what can we expect from HPP2. So if we look at the same sub-pillars, under ICT, we can expect to try and reach 100% broadband to allow for e-learning and e-health. If we touch on the energy infrastructure, there'll be concentrated efforts to reduce imports, to electrify all schools and all clinics, and to electrify rural electrification. So these are some of the expectations. From the water infrastructure space, there will be concentrated efforts for water security. We can expect the establishment, the concentration, or the acquisition of the desalination plant. And then on infrastructure, given Namibia's logistic component and well positioning, we can expect concentrated efforts to establish this regional hub. The big question is, where do we stand as young people? And it's important to try and get this youth integration. Currently, we've got a lot of graduates across all these sectors. But what does the electrical graduate do? What does the ICT graduate do? How do we become embedded as part of this HPP2 plan? So in bridging some of these pitfalls, how do we integrate ourselves as young people? So Namibia's got a wonderful PPP, public-private partnership framework, which we need to start making use of. PPPs bring in private sector finance, efficiency, management, transparency, and one could embed youth participation in the operation periods of these projects. So we're able to bring in private sector financing efficiencies and technologies. We're able to transfer risk across, and at the same time, we're able to pull in young people into some of these projects. If you look at the operational periods of these projects, they are often in excess of 20 years, which gives young people an opportunity to come into some of these projects at an early stage and basically grow into the projects and develop key skills within our sectors. To achieve this, concentrated efforts would be required to ensure that in the PPP laws, there's a youth participation component. The second area could be ring fencing projects for young Namibians using the public-private or the Public Procurement Act. So because construction is very highly capital intensive, it can create a lot of jobs. We've got a large pool of unemployed young Namibians, and to curb this job creation, lack of jobs issue, one could develop a dedicated youth program within the construction sector. So there are construction projects that are built for under 3 million, under 2 million, and these projects effectively could be ring-fenced for young people. These projects could easily be simple activities such as debushing or building of simple structures such as culverts, or supporting on existing projects. Alternative security mechanisms could be used for some of these projects to ring fence them so that the barrier to enter is not too high. So if a $3 million contract is awarded to a young person, as opposed to requiring a 10% security or collateral for the project as a performance guarantee. One could have alternative flexible mechanism for these ring-fenced projects to try and get young people into the infrastructure space using the Public Procurement Act. And the sub-clauses are there under Section 29. If we look forward and we move up one step, venture capital has always been a key component to drive development within young people. However, venture capital is often frowned upon because it looks predominantly at high risk projects. So if we look at the post-seed space, where young people have been in the space for more than a year or 2 years, one could establish a venture capital firm that could address some of these startup businesses or post-startup businesses. One could link tax breaks to these venture capital projects and initiatives to ensure that the funding for these projects is effective and that it's actually able to assist to acquire plant and equipment over a dedicated sort of period of time. This could obviously be curbed into an incubation program and could also be used to access new markets. So one would be able to access key markets using a venture capital firm with the backing, knowing that the funding and the support is actually in place. Another key component to look at is mentorship. So when we talk of mentorship, a lot of times the assumption is that you have somebody holding your hand. Our view is that there's 2 levels of mentorship. So you have business owners mentorship, which could be developed through a program similar to what the Roads Authority have, which is a labor-based program, which intentionally ring-fences certain projects to allow for participation of SMEs. A similar initiative could be used to develop youth-owned businesses into some of these mainstream activities. And the second one is employees. So currently we've got a lot of graduates that are unemployed. And it's unfortunate because there are some opportunities that they can tap into. However, a dedicated undergraduate program, which is enforced by a task force, could be the solution to some of this mentorship and the early stage entry into the infrastructure space. So if we look at the steps to consider and how one could possibly implement some of these measures, an easy low-hanging fruit would be the establishment of a task force to monitor and implement some of these recommendations. This could be established 3 months into the establishment of HPPII. This task force would then be predominantly responsible for implementing some of the short-term measures. The second one is then obviously ring-fencing some of the projects using the PPA, the Public Procurement Act. This is something that could be implemented within 6 months, identifying some key projects, getting some of the public entities to be part of this program, and then intentionally rolling out these projects for the key stakeholders. The longer sort of activities would be the establishment of a mentorship program. This would take about a year to sort of implement, simply because of the monitoring component that's required with it and the various incentives that would be built into the program to ensure that business owners and employers are actually part of this program. In the second sort of part of the HPPII, one could push to get this venture capital fund established along with the National Construction Council. The reason this would take a little bit longer is if one wants to incorporate tax breaks to allow for corporates to basically reinvest back into the venture capital and create a sustainable model, this could take a little bit of time. And then the last part is then the public-private partnerships. Because PPPs by their very nature take a bit of time to roll out, and incorporating the requirements of having young people as part of the O&Ms, basically, the operating and maintenance within some of these projects would be key from a sustainable point of view. So having young people as part of consortiums and special purpose vehicles that would run for a 20 or a 25-year concession allows them to be able to come into an infrastructure space, add value right from the beginning, and basically stay in for a very long space of time, and then use that period to basically cover some of the costs, some of the higher capital costs that are associated with infrastructure. So we're at a crossroad as a country. If we look at a typical SWOT analysis, our strength is that we've got a youth component that's already embedded in the economic advancement pillar of the Harambee Prosperity Plan. The weakness, however, is obviously that young people are excluded from the mainstream, but it creates an opportunity on its own. In developing HPP2, we're able to ensure that young people are included into all of the pillars and are able to develop sustainable approaches and sustainable businesses that could actually be embedded into the program. The threats, obviously, that one would have to face is that COVID-19 has eroded some of the economic gains that have been built over the last couple of years, and then the obvious common corruption, greed, and obviously the general exclusion of young people into the mainstream sort of spaces. So as we move forward, it's important that within the 4 pillars, we have young people and the youth embedded in each and every one of them to basically cultivate a resilient approach to sustain our young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daringo, for that presentation. It was quite informative. It's interesting that you focused on 3 W's, where you really kicked off by just really asking the question, why should we have the conversation around infrastructure development? Then you went into what can be expected in the second HPP02, and then you also then send the ball home by really emphasizing or asking the question, where is the young person standing in this conversation? And some of the ideas that came through were really, really brilliant. And I think these are some of the submissions that will really be taken into consideration. I would like to remind the participants to please engage us through the chat room, as well as if you have, pressing questions, send them through. The idea is to engage as we go along as well, but of course we still have the slot for discussion for you to raise your hand and then get the opportunity to speak them out loud. But in the meantime, as the discussions are going ahead, if you've got a comment or you have a question, please feel free to put it in the Q&A box or also in the chat room. I enjoy it when the chat room is buzzing when I'm moderating a session, because then you also get some fresh insights from the participants. I will keep to my word and acknowledge those who at least informed us as to where they're coming from, which is mainly Windhoek people. Mwetulundila, hi, we acknowledge you. There's Jessica, the PA to the Minister of Sport, Youth and National Service. Hello, ma'am. Suleiman Kiababa, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Welcome. And then Isaac Rengura as well. The Bambui is coming out. Rengura as well from Windhoek. Hello to you. With that said, I would like to move on to our second presenter, Ms. Nashilongo Gervasius, who is representing the Internet Society of Namibia, to also just share her insights with us on today's consultation.
Hi, Rachel. Hi, everybody. Let me stand on the protocol that has already been observed, and I will start my presentation right away. For the sake of good quality audio and concentration on the presentation, I will be muting my video from this moment and we'll just concentrate on the presentation. All right. So once again, I'll be talking on energy and ICT pillars of the infrastructure, sub-pillars of the infrastructure pillar, rather. Okay. Give me a second. I need to get my presentation. Sorry, I just changed laptops before I got to this laptop. I might have to switch quickly to my other PC because I can't seem to be sharing my presentation. Miss Moderator.
Nashilongo, can we project your presentation?
I'm not too sure if you've got the latest one.
Okay.
But give me a second. It won't take more than a minute.
Okay. With a question for Mr. Panache, while we wait for Ms. Gavasius to sort herself out, the opportunity is all yours. Please raise your hand or let us know in the Q&A room. Ideally, raise your hand. I think that would be most useful. Anyone with a question? I see Isaac has written it out in the question and answer, but maybe you'd want the opportunity to speak.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you for your patience, everybody. I'm back now.
Okay, now we'll just continue. Nashilongo?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
All right, we will continue with you. But we had asked participants to ask questions while you were gone. So I just wanted to let them know that we're now moving forward with you. But if there was anyone that was on standby to start asking, please just hold that question and we'll attend to it during the discussion time. You may go ahead.
Thank you, everybody. I think everybody has been informed my name, and I will be talking particularly on the infrastructure sub-pillar, rather the infrastructure pillar, and looking at energy and ICT specifically. This is an outline of my presentation, and let me start here on the energy overview. I hope it does not bore you, but I will try not to go to as much details as possible. So there's been according to the review, that there's been an electricity demand that grows at 5% per annum. That's nationally, and there is a deficit of 200 megawatts.
Yes. Sorry for interrupting you. I hate to do that, but can you just put your presentation on full screen?
Oh, full screen. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay. So yeah, that is the energy overview, really highlighting that the country has been having a energy deficit of 200 megawatts annually, and that most of our energy generating is relying on Rakana, which is obviously dependent on seasonal flow and climate change in full view that could change as we go even further. Our largest quantity of export, as we know, is Eskom in South Africa, but Eskom obviously faces its own challenges. Yeah, we know what the challenges of electricity shortage does to development, to investment, to growth and job creation, all in all. We have also been relying on cheaper electricity import from neighboring countries. I think some of our power we get from Zimbabwe, for instance, but government remains prioritizing the provision of electricity to educational and health facilities. And then there are reasons why for this, because that has been entirely left to government and without much private company or private partnership investment, so to say. So in the last HPP there's been 15 targets, and especially in the infrastructure pillar, and 10 were received desired outcome, and particularly on energy, I think 2 of them stands out, that there was never national load shedding in the period from 2015, 2016 to now, and that there has been some increase to electricity generation in the country. But there are also those outcomes that are still behind, and some of those that the provision of electricity to all schools and health facilities has still not been realized until now, countrywide. And there's also, but the increase also on rural electrification has also not been fully realized, and that I think about 19% of the country still has to be connected in the rural areas. These are the policy position that has been put forth during the HPP1 period. I'm not going to go through them, but I think just for references, it's important that we have them, especially for young people. I think more worthy of note is that there's been 19 independent power producers in the country generate power from renewable energy, and our keyword here is really renewable energy. And please hang on to that word as we tie on to this discussion going forward. And the country has a total installed electrical generation capacity of 624. I think we need more than that. Most of that is owned or is run by the Namibia Power Utility, NamPower, but of course there's also the independent power suppliers, which includes the regional electricity distributors, and of course majority also coming from import. I think the question we should be all asking here is where are the youth in contributing to the generation of power, especially talking about renewable energy. All right, once again, Namibia's generated electricity comes mainly from the Rakana Van Eck, which is coal-powered plant here in Windhoek. There's also a heavy fuel oil powered plant in Wolfish Bay, and of course Trekkoppie in Nerongo region. Then I think globally there is a movement to move towards clean fuels and technology, and for youth, this is skewed because they driving technologies, but also new means of living, including sustainable living. So looking here, we see Namibia, one of the countries with access, Namibia's access to clean cooking fuels and technologies about ranges from 10 to 49%. And I think I've provided some more information on clean cooking fuels and technology, which is really your electricity, your biomass, and anything that does not provide, that does not result in pollution, so to say. So based on HPP2, HPP1, these are some of the key recommendations from my side, that the electricity needs, or the country needs to be electrified. The 34% of the country that is still not electrified. Particular attention to rural and unelectrified areas, such as the urban peripheries and smaller areas. And there's also a need to connect those 200 schools that are still outstanding, as per those information that we all know, that not all our schools in the country have been electrified. And rural electrification coverage, while it is now at 83%, there is still that difference that needs to be covered. So I want to quickly give some examples from energy from youth perspective, especially from other countries. So for instance, a report by the UNDP in Rwanda has found that that once grid electricity was available in many areas, 4 out of the houses would switch completely to traditional lighting sources. And that means then the money saved from switching from conventional fuel is then better served in food, education, and farming. And that children and youth were spending just an hour extra studying, for instance. And that ICTs such as radios, television, and computers had required, obviously this require electricity for their maintenance, and give people access to information such as political activities, education, and just availing livelihood options, so to say. So there is a direct connection between energy access and poverty reduction, and the ability to earn a decent living by using energy as a means to provide a variety of opportunities, which are ranging from just having a light to keeping a shop open and providing cooling space in a freezer for running a pump or irrigated land. And agriculture is worth noting here as a direct link with energy. Agriculture is one of the areas where energy can have the greatest impact by earnings. Give me a second, I just need to. Thank you. And that energy plays a key role in the entire agricultural production chain. And we see that young people, more and more young people are moving into agriculture as a sustainable mean of living, but also trying to close the gaps of food inequality and food securities in many countries. It also helps improving productivity, producing better quality products, and earning more from value added to producers. Energy also improve agricultural processes through storage and cooling that expands income for farmers, while also creating employment, especially in the SME sector, like I've mentioned before. SMEs who could be, maybe this is no longer a word, a term that we use, especially in the youth innovation place. So the other word we use, I think it's innovators, startuppers. My colleague Daringo was, I think, referring to them to another word. But yeah, startups could have lower cost, improve efficiency, broaden the services offered, and improve returns via more affordable and more reliable and high quality energy supply. So by your recommendation, a few years ago, that's actually some years ago, the UN Secretary General has launched a global initiative for sustainable energy for all, which is really encouraging international development community to improve energy access and reduce energy poverty. Renewable energy systems offers opportunity to expand energy access, especially in remote and rural areas, while also contributing to the transition to modern energy services. Renewable energy also expands access to modern energy services in developing countries, both rapidly and cost effectively. Rural energy markets in developing countries offer significant business opportunities, especially for young people, and products are being tailored specifically to meet the needs of these markets. So these are further recommendations by UN. I think that will be very important for us as in the formation of the HPP2. And I know that our national planning always considers this kind of recommendation, that we scale up clean cooking solutions. I've mentioned this already. Promoting reliable, affordable solutions that are clean and good for human health, as defined by the World Health Organization guidelines. That we take on transitional cooking solutions, and this is to maximize the benefits during the transition to universal clean cooking and intermediate cooking solutions. And cooking here is key. And I think I will refer that to other SDGs, and you'll see how that is interrelated. Increased investments, the government should increase investment in clean cooking to overcome barriers and constraint in liquidity constraint in supplies and delivery of clean cooking solutions, but also enhance multi-sectoral collaboration. That government should encourage a cross-sectoral approach between health, climate, and energy sector to better mainstream clean cooking, and the benefits here will be the young people. These are just some of the ways that we could be tracking energy progresses, which includes clean fuels and technologies, as I mentioned, and renewable energy. Renewable energy, I think I would want to believe that everybody is aware of that. Particularly in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals, energy is one of those goals that has a specific set goal of its own, goal number 7, that talks about affordable and clean energy. It is recognized as a key enabler for development. And if you look at all the other 17 goals, you see that 13 of them has indicators directly or indirectly linked to goal 7. On the other hand, universal access to energy as a high share of renewable energy and massive improvement in energy efficiency are part of the top global priorities for Sustainable Development Goal. All right, so this is what goal 7 says, and this is some of its, most of its approaches in relation to ensuring affordable, reliable, and sustainable and modern energy for all. I will not be going through all of it, but I've just put it here for interest's sake, because this presentation will be availed by all. All right, so we move on to infrastructures. I think before I move on to infrastructures that I've mentioned, I've also listed all the other 13 goals and clearly also indicated their relationships to energy as targets and indicators, just for those who could peruse later. And I move on to ICT infrastructure. I think before I move into ICT infrastructure, is just to summarize there that the clean energy or the energy space has opportunities for young people to to not just partake, but also to benefit and close those gaps of unemployment, for instance, because young people are innovators, and we have seen over and over how their innovations have for instance, resulted in products that are really beneficial and that are safe for the environment and for society. I also didn't highlight, for instance, some of the projects, for instance, that that our parastatals have done, especially Nampower have done in the energy space. I think they had a campaign a few years ago that distributed is it millions, is it 1 million bulbs, which are energy sufficient, power saving, and good for the environment. While that has been done, it's important to note that that process rarely involved the young people, or the young people have not benefited fully through this process. So it's just like my colleague have mentioned, that involvement and opportunities for young people to be thought, to be looked at in these kind of processes, because things we could be exporting, we could be finding results or solutions right here at home. Okay, now we move on to ICT infrastructures. So ICTs forms a strategic priority sector. Sustained investment in the national ICT infrastructure have also competitively positioned the country in the region, and has a prerequisite for and potential major contributor to economic advancement, contributes to limitless possibilities with few boundaries for all sectors of society. And finally, ICTs also increase the competitiveness of business and commerce in the global markets place. There's no doubt about that. We know from the Sustainable Development Goals, there's a specific goal that deals with that, which is goal number 9. All right, so HPP also had specific targets that dealt with ICTs. For instance, one was that 80% of the population of Namibia needed to be covered by broadband service by 2020. That has not been achieved, but also that 80% broadband connections and usage to all primary and secondary school in Namibia to allow e-learning by 2020. We know that that has not been achieved. And we have been exposed, especially during this COVID time, and how even in the past the past 6-7 months of quarantine, that we have children who has not received education because of connectivity. So broadband connections and usage was also targeted. At least 70% of health facilities in Namibia to allow e-health by 2020. We are also yet to achieve that. And that the other target was 100% broadband connections and usage to all public sector agencies in Namibia to allow e-governance by 2020. We might have made some progress there, but not 100% completely. And that there was also another target is 100% coverage by digital TV and radio broadcasting services, broadcast to all households by 2020. That has also not been achieved completely. All right, so out of the 15 targets for this pillar of infrastructure, like I mentioned before, 10 produce desired outcomes and were on targets, and particularly on ICTs, the one is that 80% of the population was covered by broadband service by 2020. Coverage, yes, maybe, but not access, and that the I see here also 100% broadband connectivity and usage in all public sectors. Yes, and I don't know. there's a wider terms when you're talking about connectivity and usage and coverage in between connectivity and usage, and so hence the numbers here could be telling us something that many people would not be experiencing. So also 100% coverage by digital TV and broadcast to all households. There's still also some exemptions there. All right, also here are some of the outcomes that are still behind in the ICT infrastructure pillar, such as that the connectivity and usage in schools, as referred to e-learning earlier, but also within the health industry in regards to health facilities and facilitating of e-health. Generally, 97% of our population is covered by 2G. This could be disputed. We could be maybe 99 or 98, but also that 83% of the population have access to 3G service, which is the minimum requirement to access proper broadband services. However, only 34% of the population have access to 4G services. 4G services is your what is termed as broadband, your high, faster connectivity, so to say. Of course, there are draft guidelines in place in terms of broadband coverage for all primary and secondary school, but this has not, while we have guidelines, this has not been achieved. We have seen, I think, recently Telecom or MTC asking the clients with 3G cards or to go to mobile homes and turn them in to be converted to 4G. So that also speaks to the upgrading of 4G services in the country, but also that the two entities are upgrading their sites not only from 2G to 3G, but also from 3G to 4G, which enable users to access and uphold information online within a shortest period of time, and as provided by National Broadband Policy. Okay, so these are some of the laws and policies that are in place, but also just some basic statistics on telecommunications in the country in terms of connectivity. I think key here to note is that that 7,141 people, especially young people, are employed in the ICT sector. All right. Yeah, I think that's the only key data that I could look there, and the rest is could be perused for yeah, at own usage. All right, and here we have this data. This is data from the Ministry of ICT on network infrastructure distribution. I see you see here networks and towers and operators by region. We see that the entity with the biggest infrastructure, so to say, in the country is MTC, of course, and then Powercom, and then and NBC, and also just giving you here a total of infrastructure distribution in the country, but also by region. In terms of fixed line services, this data is also provided by the Ministry of ICT. There's been a decline in fixed line subscribers, and this is just during the period of 2012 to 2019. And there's been a dip, a sharper dip almost from 2017 to 2019, where it's not just over the closer to 200,000 Namibians who has a fixed line in their homes has declined to 2019. And I think the reasons there is very clear. People are finding perhaps mobile broadband to be more efficient, more reliable. All right, so this is mobile penetration. Once again, this data is provided by the Ministry of ICT. So this is a national data. We have it by region and by population coverage in terms of 2G and 3G and 4G, obviously. We see here that 4G, which is what we should be operating by now, only has a penetration of 37.7, let's say 38 for safety countrywide. And we see your region with the biggest penetration of 4G, for instance, is really your rural, your urban areas. So if then there's that much concentration in urban areas, what are we saying to the youth that are living in rural and unconnected areas, and the opportunities of using ICTs for self-development and for innovation. All right, just some figures on internet speed in Namibia, that it has decreased from 2017 to the, in 2017. This data is from the World Economic Forum, is provided in 2017. Okay, so what are we recommending in terms of the ICT infrastructure, especially in relation to policy priorities to maximize youth benefit in the pillar of ICT? There's an urgent need to operationalize the Universal Access and Service Fund. I think, I don't know if there's anybody who wouldn't know what this is, and then we can talk about it later. But also that there needs to be relaxation in terms of regulations for community networks, that it should be adaptable to realities and enable bottom-up approach to connectivity. I think from my presentation, you have seen how from infrastructure to connectivity, we see that everything is operator driven, that your MTCs, your telecom, your powercom owns, for instance, just the satellites or infrastructure, but we're not really seeing what communities are doing. And globally, there's high evidence that people, even in developing countries, are building their own means of connectivity, which is like a back end of what you're already connected on, maybe by MTC. So for instance, you have one person using maybe their SIM card, one SIM card to benefit 100 people within their community. And a good example that has also enjoyed legislation approval in South Africa is the Zenzeleni community network. I had hoped to give you a case study on this, but because of time, I think that will take up so much time. That communities, especially led by young people, are building their own networks and really benefiting their communities from their own knowledge. For instance, in Namibia, there's also a number of community network initiatives. I am aware of one in Groot Oop, and Nanar, the Sun communities, where really young people are connecting their communities, because obviously data from your usual providers are very expensive, just amongst others, and that the infrastructures is not reliable in sports where people are not, there's coverage, so to say, but people in specific areas are not connected. But also the other one is to consider TV white space, and it is an alternative to connectivity. And the country has seen a number of pilots in terms of TV white space, experiencing on TV white space as a means of connectivity. I think the regulator and a lot of people in the technology space are aware of this as a potential. ITU, which is your UN agency that deals with technology, has approved TV white space as a mean of technology. And I think there's an opportunity for Namibia to jump onto that. I know a lot of young people also within the technology space who are exploring this, but most of the time they just don't know where to go. And so hence they sit with ideas at home. The other recommendation here is to approve open access guidelines, which is really infrastructure sharing between operators rather, but also to promote e-services. That there's a lot of young people who are not just building software infrastructures, for instance, and applications and things like that, that they believe that provide services to the country. We have seen, for instance, a few years ago, it was a young person who has come up with a initiative to help women who are expecting to just get SMSs and go to the hospital on time and get those reminders. And those are really some of the services that we need in terms of just overall national development, but also services that are produced by young people. So there could be a need to zero rate some of these sites and services, and especially now during COVID, we have seen how even students who were in urban areas and could access e-learning, so to say, they just couldn't, for instance, just get onto a UNAM portal. And the opportunities are there really to say that let's zero rate some of these sites and services, and so that young people can get that information for free without worrying about the data that they have to buy, or they have to decide whether I should buy bread or buy data. But also promote innovation. There's a boom in innovation currently in the country, and I think we've been observing that startups and innovations hubs popping up here and there, and which is really, really good. But we're noticing that there is no intentional effort, especially by central government, to promote innovations, and that this kind of innovations through the hubs, through the projects that we take on, should be decentralized and get to regions, but also to get to people who are not in places where we have facilities, really getting to where the people are. I've mentioned this before, increased uptake of broadband in schools. And the question really is mobile broadband adequate for, once again, mobile development, for instance, web development, real innovation of ICTs or e-services, so to say. But there's also a need to pass the data protection bill. This is to instill confidence in technology users. We see some people really don't just want to use the technology because they see maybe abuse happening online from person to person, but also just the usual crime of your data is stolen, or whatever that you're building. Perhaps you saved up on the cloud, and tomorrow you come, your cloud is hacked, and all your data is gone. The cyber crime bill, I think a month ago, the Minister of ICT have announced that Cabinet has approved for final consultation, or for public consultation on that. This bill needs to be to have clear targets on public awareness and education, especially on electronic crimes, because at most of the time, because of lack of education, people just wouldn't know. I see this is done by somebody else, and I see it's okay, and I wouldn't know if it is if it's a crime, for instance, especially amongst young people. Otherwise, I think some of the issues that were standing out in that bill was that there was a concentration on the punishment of cyber criminals or cyber criminals. And we know especially young people just do things for fun, and that the concentration then shouldn't be on the punishment, but it should be more on public awareness. All right, so I want to quickly just tie up my discussion. I don't know how I'm doing on time, on the relationship between ICT and energy and the opportunities for young people. So the communications industry, obviously.
Ms. Cavasius?
Yes.
I will unfortunately need to interject so that we can just quickly go into discussion, and would also like to give Ms. Matthias the opportunity to just do some reactions. But I would like you to keep your final remarks in mind for when you conclude. After you respond to the Q&A, then maybe you can add some of these insights that you wanted to share in your closing remarks. But thank you so much for your presentation. I think the takeaway message here is really that when it comes to energy and ICT infrastructure, it's important that for the youth, especially the focus for the youth is that whatever comes out of Harambee Prosperity Plan 2 needs to have a clean fuel focus, as well as innovative technology and legislative reform. I think COVID-19 caught everyone off guard, and for the longest time, the fourth industrial revolution has been talked about like it's a faraway dream, especially for the African context. But some of the recommendations that you have on there really capture the essence of expediting the process. So with that said, I really want to say thank you, and please your final remarks for when you answer some of the questions. To both yourself and Panashe, I would like to say please go through the chat as well as the Q&A to just look at some of the questions that were specifically addressed to you, and keep those in mind when you do respond to the participants. And as for the participants, I have noted you, Rengura, you've had your hand up literally for the past 30 minutes. But everyone else that would like to ask a question, this is the opportunity to really raise your hand. Javi, I've also lined you up. There are some people, Suleiman Mwetulundila, I've also lined you up to engage us during the discussion session. But anyone else that wants to ask a question, there are some that have just written out long texts in the chat function. But please raise your hand so that we can take note of you. It's, I think, more efficient that way. I would like to give Ms. Matthias the opportunity to just briefly react to what our presenters have presented so far.
Thank you very much, Raquel, and thank you, Panashe and Nashilongo, for those excellent presentations. I think you have really effectively reviewed the progress made and contextualized some of the challenges that we're facing as a country. And you've also injected some fresh perspective on where the new areas to be explored could and should be. Some general commentary to your interventions is that we definitely need to manage expectations in this process. The first Harambee Prosperity Plan was even in a better financial environment between 2015 to 2020. It wasn't great. We were still dealing with independent intervening variables. We were still dealing with a drought and global commodity prices declining. And that necessitated government to embark a fiscal consolidation strategy. And as you are aware, that fiscal consolidation strategy really tightened or closed the taps on capital infrastructure related projects, especially. Industries that felt it the most included the construction industry, and a lot of government capital projects suffered delays because of the fiscal consolidation strategy. It hurt, but it was necessary in order for us to bring the economy on a more sustainable trajectory and to curb in public expenditure. We were pleased that we managed to finish the big ticket items during the term, then as reported by Panashe, the Nekatal Dam. And we also appreciate that infrastructure development is so catalytic to economic activity. It creates jobs, it creates a lot of stimulus. There's a big value chain that benefits from these projects. So definitely in the second term, the economists are discussing the various ways that we can create more economic activity and stimulate different sectors of the economy to create the jobs. And infrastructure development across the sectors is a key pillar for that. But the reason I say we need to manage the expectations is only because of the competing developmental priorities. If you were in the conversation on Friday on social progression, you understand the increasing social need and vulnerability as well. And these are the fine balancing act that government has to meet. Our economic standing, when we discussed the economic advancement pillar, our debt ratio and how we allocate that funding, where we put that money to create some economic activity towards growth and recovery. These conversations are interdependent and they are all complementary. But with that said, it is essential. The energy, the water, the transport, and the ICT sub-pillars that we have prioritized in this high-level plan are all essential for business and economic activity to function efficiently and optimally. They also are strategic economic assets. So these are investments that can bring a return on the investments. So I agree with Panashe when you say that we need to leverage HPPII and the Public Procurement Act in order for us to leverage the capital to continue to drive towards some of these goals. Panashe, you did a good job to highlight that the barriers to this sector for young people. You took the presentation not only from what is a strategic imperative for the country, but also how to mainstream and ensure that there's more economic inclusion of young people in this sector, whether they are owners of the strategic assets or managing the strategic assets. I think your point is clear that we need to reduce the barriers to entry so that we can have a greater economic participation by the young population and not only as intended beneficiaries. We take note of the plight of engineers, professionalization of certain industries. We take note of the opportunity that has not been exploited for artisans. And we also take note, and this is rightly so, the implementation oversight function that you propose through a task force. It's a recurring theme that has been coming across. And I think it's one of the greatest lessons learned in these kind of impact plans that have a very short lifespan, is that we need to strengthen the performance delivery function. Nashilongo, we take cognizance. You aligned it very well to the global agenda for development, and you're right, Namibia's agenda is aligned to the SDGs, but you place a lot of emphasis on equity, on coverage in the rural areas, whether it's ICT coverage or energy coverage, but making sure that even with the vastness of our country, that we're able to leverage these resources to reach the remote communities. I think that is probably where we have the greatest opportunity under energy and ICT, is national coverage through universal access. Some more specific reactions to the points you made, and also providing context. We have leapfrogged in energy. This is because of the policy reform under the National Integrated Renewable Policy. We have introduced an energy mix. We move from the traditional coal to renewable energies. We've introduced solar and wind, and water has always been there. We've also demonopolized the generation of energy in the country. We opened up the sector to independent power producers. And this has been impactful. I noted a comment by Javi to say, but where is the space for young people? Young people can enter into joint ventures with other energy producers and contribute through this opened up space. Between 2015 to 2018, we have generated through 19 new IPPs. We've generated over 125 megawatts of power added onto the national grid. So it's an effective policy, and the reform is working and showing results. I think where there's still work to be done is the distribution model for on-grid and off-grid energy supply. Cabinet in 2019 did approve the modified single buyer framework, but I think that is probably the next opportunity that would move the needle for us, is the distribution. But at least on generation, we have opened up significantly. Very quickly, water. we managed to secure water supply security. The taps did not run dry, but we're not out of the woods yet because the drought is still projected to continue and Namibia is vulnerable to these adverse weather conditions. So we need to look at the green economy and look at some of our comparative advantages like the solar that we have and the long coastline that we have. Panashe, you're right to say that desalination remains a key deliverable. And I also just wanted to affirm that we have not only water supply security, but because of the policy reforms, we have also achieved energy supply security. Currently, our national demand is more or less 643 megawatts, but our generating capacity has increased to 624 megawatts if you exclude some of the mines like Scorpion Zinc. But we're 30 years old and our water infrastructure, our pipes and canals, they need a lot of rehabilitating now because of wear and tear. And we need to take note of that as well because that would require a significant investment. Onto roads, you know that Namibia has got a very good road infrastructure network. Over the term, we were able to add about 526 new kilometers. But roads is important because roads connects communities to economic opportunities. It connects industries to markets. It connects learners to schools. And I think our conversation as we, as young people, try to improve the quality of life, I think we need to look at roads, not only from the national framework, but look at mobility in the urban setting, which is where a lot of our middle class are struggling to survive because of the cost of rent, the cost of transportation in the urban center. And I think we could shift our focus to proximity to jobs, mobility, the commuter train that was envisaged, and what are some of the suggestions that could come from that. What has also been coming up in other discussions, not today, but we carry the memory, is social infrastructure, sports infrastructure, schools infrastructure, hospital infrastructure. And I think this fits to your point, Panashe, that I think through HPPII, these are strategic economic assets that can leverage the capital in the private sector to meet the need. So I'm putting it into this conversation of today as well. On ICT, Namibia has got a comparative advantage. We do have very good foundational infrastructure. And I think it must form a big and central part of our reform agenda because it is an enabler, it is an accelerator, and it can help us to leverage broader economic opportunities that are opening up with the African continental free trade area. So, and also the experience with COVID and e-learning and access to education facilities to help us to become a knowledge-based economy, ICT must be central. In our big country and the cost of development per capita, because of how sparsely populated we are and how big our country is, ICT must be leveraged to help to bring government closer to the people. So this is in line with our smart governance agenda. This is in line with our e-governance agenda, but I think it needs to be intensified towards a digital economy sort of basis. Let me stop there. Those were my high level, but also detailed reactions to the presenters. I will now open up the floor through the moderator so that we can have a more structured conversation. Thank you again for the contributions thus far.
Thank you so much, Ms. Matthias, for your reactions on the presentations by our panelists this morning. I would like to give the opportunity to Rengura. He's had his hand up. That's Isaac Rengura, to just briefly give his questions or comments towards the discussion today. A side note, please, we are not doing super well with time, so let's try and be as brief as possible, especially if it's just a comment. So Rengura, the opportunity is all yours.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
You can go ahead. I've allowed you to talk.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I would love to observe all, the protocols that have been established, and thank you for this platform. I just have a few questions and few comments to make. I've heard from Dr. Panashe telling us that on water, the government have scored 100%. that is in the first Harambee Prosperity Plan. And he alluded to things such as Nakatal Dam, yes, and access to water in the rural areas. But I've observed in our country that we do have the cost of water, which is a problem. I've seen some part of the country where they keep on running out of water, especially in Kavango East, in Rundu, where we have seen this year and sometimes last year, the town going for 3 weeks or for 2 weeks without water. Now, is this the 100 coverage of water? Because there's no cost or there's no affordability to this. And this applies to energy. Now, for somebody that stays in Windhoek, if you buy electricity of $100, I'm quite sure you get units which are below 50% of the cost that you have spent. And that makes it a concern. Again, on energy, I've also from Ms. Nashilongo, she indicated that we have only 34% missing in terms of electricity coverage. Now, my question is, we have a big population of people that are in the informal settlement, almost 1 million, if we look at the previous reports. Now, the coverage of electricity, did this include the informal settlement? Because that is where the majority are. People are even migrating from the rural areas, and government is taking electricity to the rural area while people are moving to the urban areas. Do we really have a plan for the informal settlements to be included as beneficiaries of this electricity? Because I believe it will improve their lives very well. And I also want to comment on graduate programs that Dr. Panache have said. I'm actually a student at NAS in environmental engineering, specializing in water engineering. So I'll say that we should really brainstorm on this one. We really need this type of initiative because they will really assist people as us who will become future experts in this area. And Namibia is a dry country. How did we become 100% scope? Was the target very low? Because every day, every year, we continue complaining about water. We are talking about what we have a political discussion on water that should come from the rivers. And again, we are thinking of desalination of water. Now, was that 100% really under target, or was it a proper target? So I submit my points. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Ringura, for those insights. I'd like to give the opportunity to Suleiman, if he is still around, to also take the floor. And then after Suleiman, Javi, please prepare your inputs. Suleiman, I think I'm allowing you to talk. Are you there? Because you were typing quite vigorously in the Q&A.
Hello.
Okay, then, okay.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, good morning. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. It's just a contribution actually, and I want to know whether it's possible or not possible. We have an issue in the country, and that issue has been bothering me I always wanted to ask whether it can be done or cannot be done. The issue here is about access to hospitals, schools, and low-cost housing. Is it possible to make a law in this country that the companies involved in mining, fishing, and beef industry to contribute as part of their CSR to building schools in regions, affordable housing, and hospitals, and maintain them to take away the pressure from government, because I feel this is the biggest issue the country has. And if it can be done, which I don't know legally whether it's something that can be looked into, I feel that will take away our issue of implementation. We lack implementing in this country, and I think the reason is because we look at government most of the time in doing things for us. That's all.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Suleiman. I would like to give Javi the opportunity to give his input. Javi, you can just unmute your mic.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. First, I would like to comment on what the general youth participation in the energy space, right? So, of course, we're in a situation where we have people, where we have projects that are very capital intensive, and young people don't really have access to that capital. And the people who have access to that capital are the ones that are really only present when you come to join. They are really present when you come to joining the importance of any. Hello, can you hear me?
Javi, you can go ahead. Javi, we could hear you just fine. All right, I think Javi is sorting something out at his end. I'd like to give the opportunity to Miss Alisa Amupala, who also indicated that she would like to contribute. Ma'am, are you still with us online? I can't find you.
Good afternoon, Rachel. I am still here.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Ms. Matthias, for organizing this very insightful platform. And I'd like to congratulate the speaker for those very crystallized recommendations. I wanted to just give some comments on Panashe and Nashilongo's presentation. I think where I want to come in on Panashe is really around asset management, which he put clearly that, you know, we have a $10 billion assets in the country in terms of already existing infrastructure. However, in terms of our maintenance, we do face a challenge. And I think this is where I see an opportunity for the youth. And in my view, it's very important that we look at how we enlist the youth as suppliers to the public sector. And by that, I mean that in as much as we need to provide financing for them, we also need to look beyond the Public Procurement Act. He did make some recommendation there, but also cascading that all the way down to government entities or the SOEs, for example, because Public Procurement Act tend to be very high value. But we now need to look at how the procurement policies within the respective public enterprises cater for the youth. And as a person in the infrastructure industry, particularly ICT, we've managed to bring in youth to, for instance, build towers. And one of the questions that we get all the time is, how did you get such young engineers build the tower for the first time? And often it's around payment, because we know that youth are not able to afford financing or have surety. So what we do, for example, which is a discretion we took, which we'd like to think it can be cascaded across all entities, is making sure that the payment, there are down payments so that you eliminate the barrier of having to go to the bank to secure financing because you do have the skills, but essentially you don't have the capital to be able to finance your project. So your down payment, for example, we started off with the 50% of the value of the project. In some cases, we got burned and we look at capping it to 30%, but there is always that down payment to enable them to hit the ground running. So I think that's one element that we need to look at. And then I also wanted to just make an intervention in terms of the energy presentation by Ms. Nashilongo, then to say that all infrastructure do work in a vertical manner and they sort of enable each other. For the ICT infrastructure to function, we would need the energy to be up and running for the uptime of the network, for example. Now, what we're seeing on the back end of the value chain is that there's a new growing trend on energy service company. And yes, Namibia has done fairly well on the IPP. But then when it comes to the moving from the infrastructure now to the usage, a lot of time there could be issues of maintenance of the genset at the infrastructure, maybe making sure that the power is up at all times so that even when there's a downtime, luckily for us, our strength is that we don't have any load shedding. But there are times when power may be down for an hour. And there you need an uptime, and that's with the value that you can add at the back end of the value chain, where you could actually have dedicated companies that just make sure that the energy is up, that everything with the REDS and the national energy supplier is well synchronized. So energy service company is an emerging trend, and it would be great to also look at it under HPPII, how you can add value and unlock all other industries. And the last one is really around maybe demarcating the existing infrastructure that's now in terms of ICT vis-a-vis the greenfield infrastructure. Because now it looks like we've done quite well in terms of access, and broadband usage is an overriding theme in the HPP1, but in HPP2, we really want to shift to service. Now, looking at the infrastructure portfolio that Nashilongo indicated, they're almost looking at 900 towers. You still have areas where, yes, there is a tower and then we need to upgrade now to 3G or 4G. But in some cases, there might be also duplication of infrastructure. You may see two towers next to each other, but then they don't have network. You still have 2G. And how do you now maximize those infrastructure that exist is to make sure that we minimize duplications. And by minimizing duplication is really identifying under HPP2 infrastructures that are already duplicated and then decommissioning those and moving them to other areas where there might be coverage, but maybe it's not as robust. And we now need to make sure that we upgrade those existing infrastructures. Then you now have the back end again on terms of the greenfield where you need to deploy brand new infrastructure. And here you have other dependency as well on other sectors. You have the land issue, you have the environmental issues, and you now have the issues of site surveying, and you have now the issue of project management as well from a construction point of view. This is really where the youth come in to say there are many opportunities for youth to add value. We have a lot of graduates, like Palashi is saying, that are unemployed. But when you look at the bids that are coming in, it's very difficult to say that's a youth company. There's very few participations from the youth as well. And it will be important to look under HPPII to see how can we unlock these opportunities that are already in our ecosystem, but then we're not seeing enough youth uptake. Is it financing? Is it the skills? And like he rightfully saying, maybe this is where the mentorship programs come into play as well. I'll end there for now. Thank you.
I will thank you so much, Ms. Amopolo. I'll take two more questions and then we'll give it over to our panelists to respond. I'd like to give the opportunity to Mwetulundila, Florian. They were quite active in the Q&A group as well. Mwetulundila, I see you are online, so this is your opportunity.
Good afternoon to everyone. I don't really have so much to contribute. I'm just following carefully the discussions. They are quite interesting. Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
can hear you, Metulindila. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, I'm saying I don't have so much to contribute today, but the discussions are quite interesting. However, I just want to really confirm the improvements that myself I have come across with, especially in the rural areas in the north when it comes to water infrastructure. So many people at the moment are having access to clean drinking water. You find that most of the households nowadays are having like taps in their household. So this is really one thing that is so commendable about, I think, the HPP1, if you say that that was one of their focus, and as well as rural electrification. There is so many people that have got access to electricity now. I can only speak to, of course, the villages that I have seen with my own eyes. So that is really commendable from our government. And when it comes to the energy sector, I've noticed that there's so many youths nowadays that are registering companies to actually venture into solar, for example. I just want to ask, uh, if we actually invest too much into solar power and other stuff, is it not probably going to create a conflict of interest with the red companies? Because, for example, myself, I'm based in Grootfontein. I've seen there's a huge solar plantation here in Grootfontein, but it's not being utilized at the moment. Probably it's due to fear that maybe it's gonna keep out the Sinoret from business. I don't know. Maybe someone need to explain that. But otherwise, thank you for the opportunity, madam.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Florian. Ms. Matthias actually just alerted me to the fact that you have been consistently participating since last week, Monday. So thank you very much for being such a faithful young person and making sure that you take the time out to really give your insights in this consultation. The last person I will give the floor to is Mr. Lazarus Amukeshe. And then after that, Panashe, please prepare yourself to respond to some of the questions that came your way.
Hello, can you hear me? All right, thank you so much. Good morning, still morning, 2 minutes to 12. So good morning, everybody. Allow me to stand and observe on already observed protocols. I think most of what I had to say has been covered, at least a bigger portion of it. But my first suggestion is, I think it will be important to somewhat add another word to the pillar, which then becomes infrastructure development and maintenance, because I think the maintenance part really needs to come to the table and be emphasized in the whole infrastructure development arena, because like Panashe and Ms. Ampolo rightly said, we've got a whole lot of government assets that are somewhat not really used to the full capacity. We've got buildings across the board that are breaking down. If we look at even just around Windhoek, we've got the flats in Central Hospital, as an example, just one. The same youth hostel there by Katutura. All those facilities could potentially create a whole lot of opportunities for young people around, but they are not being taken good care at all. And I think that will now fill into, also we need to clearly define the dividends that we want to see from the investments that we're making. I think we haven't clearly put out what we really want out of investing these dividends. So, I mean, from investing into infrastructure. So it somewhat kind of becomes very difficult to measure, because if you look at a couple of comments and chats that we've seen is, are these things, when we say we have achieved 100% in water, what is it really true? I think if we can set up a target to say, this is really what it is, and this is the benefits that could come out of this possible investment, I think that would also do. And the third one is on white elephants. I think white elephants are not common to Namibia, but it's those investments that are mainly based on hype. When we see something is happening good, and then we also want to venture into that. And after a while, we see that it's not going to work for Namibia, for example. We've got a couple of, I think, the one that I can remember from the top of my head is a museum in Okahanja. I think if we can take an audit of those white elephant projects, or that have been completed or that are still not completed, and rechannel them to a different kind of usage, and not just allow them to stay there for nothing. I think that will also work. And even if we have to auction them off and make better use of them, I think that will also work. And then there's also a need for entire government assets to be audited. I think there was a time, I don't know which year, it was 2015 or 16, where all government assets, especially the houses, the list was being compiled. And up until now, that list hasn't been out. It has not been out. And I think we also need much more capacity to be given to the Ministry of Works in terms of them taking up a whole lot of engineers and artisans that we have here. Because if then we are saying there's...
Mr. Lazarus, I need you to start wrapping up for time's sake.
Okay, sorry, thank you so much. On just on the last point is on ensuring that the Ministry of Works has enough people to allow the maintenance of government facilities, because then that will help in ensuring that they're kept up to standard and they don't run off. And I think just one last point is on the utility costs that Mr. Arunga rightly said. I think you are grinning your face. I think let me just end here. Sorry. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe perhaps type out the rest of what you wanted to say. Our rapporteurs will take note of that. I'd like to then give the opportunity over to our panelists to just respond to some of the questions that were raised and also then give us their closing remarks.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Raquel. Thank you for the questions. I'll try and answer the ones that were directed to me. So I'll start with Mr. Ringura. You mentioned the scoring, and I think you had a query about how we scored 100% on some of the items. So the scoring on HPP1 was based on targets that were set. So as we sort of alluded earlier, there were 15 targets set between the 4 sub-pillars. And if you look at the components underwater, the 2 targets that were set were to increase access to water for human consumption from the coverage of 50% and get it up to 100%. So that was the target. That was the first target from a water point of view. The second one was to ensure sufficient water supply reserves for business activities, including industrialization, residential, servicing, and housing development. So in those 2 components, both of those components, were all adequately achieved. But I do agree with you that there are still some issues that one could obviously work on around water. We touched on the cost of water as far as desalination, and that's why an option like a public-private partnership is the route to go, because within it you embed private sector innovation. You embed output specific specifications in your project, and you are able to reduce the cost of water by setting up a robust PPP for it. I mean, it's a whole discussion, and I can tell you that it's something that government is looking at. But by using effective PPPs, you are able to bring in private sector innovation, transfer the risk, and bring in the capital to address some of these projects, some of these constraints, and actually reduce the cost of water. If I look at the graduate program that we spoke about, I agree 100% that it must be an intentional process. The quickest way to do it is to set up this task force or this project management office that actually ensures that the targets and the activities are actually being done on time and as required. If I touch on Mr. Suleiman's comments on the access to hospitals and low-cost housing, and tying it up with the CS, with the corporate social responsibility for the mining, beef industries and the fishing industries. I think it could work. The challenge normally when it becomes a CSR program, it's optional. So one doesn't have to do it. So my view would be to have actual programs that are directed to those items. And once again, I mean, the quickest, easiest way is to do the PPP route. But one could also look at, bringing forth tax breaks that allow industries and private sector to invest in some of those areas. Because when it becomes a tax break, it becomes more of an incentive that gets, private sector to actually intentionally put that money to some of those key areas. The issue will always just be, how do you manage and how do you monitor those processes? Because I think that's been the biggest challenge that we sort of face. And that sort of brings me to Mr. Lazarus's sort of question around maintenance. So if you look at a life cycle of an asset, government's role is actually not to develop assets, but to deliver a service. So if you look at the service delivery component, we often look and focus for a very long time only on the asset. So it's good to have a dam, but the dam needs an operator. It's good to have a road, but that road needs maintenance over its life cycle. So that whole maintenance element is a whole chapter that we haven't tapped into. So we are aware that we struggle to maintain some of our assets. A lot of them are white elephants, like we've rightfully said, but those white elephants need operators. So if I take the example that Mr. Lazarus gave of the museum or the ICT sort of facilities, those museums could easily be outsourced to a private sector on a 5-year or a 10-year concession to basically manage. So that the big capital intensive part, which is building the asset, is basically done. What young people can then come on board and do is run their life for that asset, which means you basically manage the operations. You basically ensure that the maintenance is done as per a particular schedule. And there's KPIs that we can sort of work towards and work under to ensure that that life cycle management is actually being sort of implemented. I think that's as many as I can tackle, and I'll hand over the floor to Ms. Raquel. I can tackle some more later on, I suppose.
All right, thank you so much, Panashe, for that response. I'd like to give the opportunity to Nashilongo to also just respond to some of the questions that were specifically addressed to her presentation, and also give us closing remarks. Panashe, I don't think we'll have another opportunity, but I do want to say thank you so much for your insightful presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I look forward to an inclusive youth HPPII infrastructure pillar.
And thank you, Raquel. As I take over to answer some of the questions here, there was a point by Mr. Ringura on rural area inclusion on energy and ICT. I think by all indications, we have seen that we are somehow meeting our targets, as earlier indicated. The challenge is actually getting that to benefit the people in terms of also getting the young people to really benefit from it in terms of creating core projects at local level, because it's one thing to have electricity or ICTs, like Ms. Alisa was saying, in the area, but the real challenge will be what happens then if that electricity is available, if it's there. It's streamlining that to get the young people to get involved in, to create value chains for themselves at local level. And with that, you really need government assistance, government assistance, to help with that decentralization process, so to say. I'm trying to get to my question here. To the next question on by Mr. Is that Mr. Gosh. Here. By Mr. Hold on. Oh yeah, Mr. Gavi, on access to capital for young people. I think that is a challenge, but we've also seen, for instance, some of the proponents of some of the positive news already coming through, for instance, with the Ministry of Finance advising the banks to give collateral-free loans. I think that's a new window of hope for young people, especially who want to innovate wherever they are, in the areas of artisan, like everybody has mentioned here. And I think that could be that's possibly going to be a new break as we get into HPP2. I can't also remember what Mr. Gavi also said, but Ms. Ampolo, I think, was very, very clear in terms of HPP2 and what the direction should be, that it should now, I think, in terms of broadband, in terms of energy, we're really making progress. The issue is now the implementation process. Now that we have broadband and everybody is converging to 4G, and we're looking at 80%, at least by 2021 or early 2021, because this year is already over. What really the HPP then should be targeting in terms of uptake, in measuring this the impact of this uptake, the impact of the connectivity. So what happens then when young people have moved on to 4G? Are they creating more? Are they innovating more? Are they coming up with business viable business ideas? But not only their part, what is the private sector doing, or even the development sector doing to meet them, to build these ideas and really become nationalized, be part of the sort of box, not just box stick, but tangible results that has come out of these ideas. I think for a long time, especially in the ICT sector, they've always been this question about, so what happens then when people are being connected? There should be possibly a clear policy targets in terms of promotion of services online, that young people are educated, or some sort of literacy in terms of what are the opportunities that lies with the ICT, other than just social networking and connecting. And then Wetulundila was also spoke about the conflict of interest with the Reds. I think development works differently and diversely, that the work of PPP in collaboration with young people at grassroots level could be an opportunity that benefits regional electricity distributors, and that provides an opportunity to cut costs, like we've mentioned, in terms of exporting power, or looking at one dimension or one mean of producing energy or power that is not renewable, and it's not safe for the environment. And then Keshe also asked for the maintenance of old infrastructure and white elephants audit. I think that question was answered very well by Mr. Panache, and I don't want to take her out. I think the main issue is really that the next HPP should largely involve young people at all levels, that the processes shouldn't just be directed, or shouldn't be just handled in the usual governance structures, but there should be a way to harmonize the approach and really get young people to be involved, especially when we are looking at lowering that 49 or 48% of unemployment level, that with the fourth industrialization, as we say, we're not looking at opening new industries or infrastructures, but to do the work with what we already have. Just the opportunities to be opened and to get people involved. I think I'll end there. There were some questions on the Q&A, but I see that the youth advisor was constantly answering them. But as I close, really, I just want to highlight or rather note the youth advisors office for really taking this approach. I think it's, if at all, I think this consultation processes could be the cutthroat to getting an HPPP that is very inclusive, and especially that speaks to the young people's need. We know the young people are the majority of the population, but also that they are largely unemployed, and hence not only then mainstream their work through the social progression pillar, but all throughout. And we hope that this consultation continues throughout, and we're really, really grateful that we are here to help where we can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nashilongo, for your closing remarks and as well as responding to some of the questions that were raised your way. Really want to say thank you to both you and Panashe. This was quite the heavy pillar to carry, but I think you both did such good jobs. I'd like to give the opportunity over to our rapporteurs to then just summarize what the two of you have presented thus far today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Raquel. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity, myself and Ndapandula, to give you the summary of our discussion this morning. Our discussion is on the infrastructure development pillar. Just to quickly take you through the two presenters. Firstly, Ms. Panashe Ndaringo, who basically leaned on water and transportation. Just to run through the key highlights that came out of her presentations, emphasis that the HPP2 must be modern and reliable infrastructure. And then, of course, what is worth noting in her presentations are the success stories, or rather performances, pertaining to, just to mention a few, the compilation constructions of the Nakadal Dam. They implement the water managed aquifer recharged, established cabinet committee on water management, and then of course other performances on the upgrade of the Windhoek Okahanja Road to Duel, establish new irrigation infrastructure, plus maintaining the existing infrastructure. And then, of course, the Walsh Bay, Kransberg, Tsumeb sections of the rail network to SADC standards. What really stood out of her the presentation of Ms. Ringo is the overall scoring of a 67%. And then if one has to look at it in terms of the energy, ICT, transport and water, the overall being on energy 50%, ICT 60%, transport 75%, and then water 100%. And then of course, worth noting also is the success story on the increase in local electricity generating capacity from 400 megawatts to 600 megawatts by 2020. And then of course, increase access to water for human consumptions for 50% of the population. Emphasis is on the 94%. And then of course, finally, what stood out of her presentation in terms of the summary is the 1,192 kilometer, which basically means the number of kilometers upgrades to bitumen and or gravel roads added to the national road network. Our second presenter was Mr. Nashilongo Garvasius, who leaned a lot on the energy and the ICT. What was quite of a summary in his presentation was that electricity demand grew at about 5% per annum, Generation capacity delivery was 400 megawatts during HPP1. And then of course, there was a deficit of about 200 megawatts. 332 megawatts generating capacity linked to a hydro supply from Rakana depend on the seasonal flow. And then of course, he also spoke about the electricity is exported from the neighboring country. The bulk of it is actually from the ESCOM in SA. And then of course, country experiencing electricity challenges impact on the industry, investment, attraction, growth, as well as the job creation. And then he also further mentioned on the SADC sub-region expert electricity deficit due to a higher economic growth plus aging infrastructure. And then also mentioned that what it is not a viable option for Namibia is reliance on cheaper electricity imports from the neighboring countries. And then the desired outcome on target, just to quickly run through them for the sake of time, on energy, zero national local shedding, increase local electricity generation capacity from 400 megawatts in 2016 to 600 megawatts by 2020. He, however, also mentioned that what is behind is the provision of electricity to all schools and health facility by 2020. And then, of course, increase rural electrification from 34% in 2015 to 50% by 2020. What is regarded as in the progress in terms of energy with emphasis on the policy, number one, government approved the National Integrated Resource Plan, which is to broaden the energy mix to include solar, wind, gas, as well as diesel. The renewable energy policy approved as well by Cabinet. The national energy policy also approved by Cabinet. The independent power producer policy also approved by Cabinet. The modifier single buyer model framework also approved by Cabinet. And then of course, in terms of the progress on energy sector, there is 19 independent power producer. Namibia's maximum demand stood at 643 megawatts. Namibia has a total installed electrical generation capacity of about 624 megawatts. 240 megawatts hydroelectrical power plant from the Kunene River in Rakana, 120 megawatts Van Wyk coal powered plant in north of Windhoek. And then finally, he concluded with the Paratus 24 megawatts heavy fuel oil powered plant in Walwish Bay and 5.78 megawatts solar plant in the Tekopi, as I don't know whether I'm saying this correctly, in the Irongo region. Just to quickly also just to run through them one by one in terms of the energy infrastructure, what is worth noting during our discussion for this morning is that the energy infrastructure so far have actually scored a 50% of the pillar score. And the key recommendation there is that electrify the 34 of the country that is not getting electrified, especially rural. Electrify the 200 schools still outstanding and increase rural electrification coverage. What is to expect in HPP2 intentional efforts to reduce imports of 0% electricity to schools and clinics, rural electrifications to 100%. What is also worth reading about is looked at the UNDP report. There they put emphasis on learning from a country such as Rwanda, energy in agriculture playing a key role by improvising existing earning. Also look at the United Nations recommendations on energy, prioritize policy actions, which is also a recommendations from the UN by scaling up cleaning cooking solution, transitional cooking solution, increased investment, enhance a multi-sectoral collaboration, tracking energy progress, clean fuel and technology. A lot of emphasis, and I think the discussion was a lot on the renewable energy. Energy has a benefit for youth as they are innovators and they can tackle their unemployment. And then of course, 13 of the 17 SDG goals has a direct or indirect link to goal number 7, which is of course the affordable and clean energy, water, energy and SDG, just to sum up this energy infrastructure, a universal access to energy as a higher share of renewable energy, which is also a top goal priority for the sustainable development. To give you a summary on the water infrastructure, the outcome here is 60% of the pillar. Water is also seen during our discussion as a cross-cutting to other sector. Concentrate efforts to ensure water security, emphasis on the desalination plant. That conclude the water. Transport infrastructure, with obviously the four outcome, 75% of the pillar, it scores 75%. Here, what to expect in HPP2, additional measures to develop Namibia to become a logistic hub. That concludes the transport infrastructure. On ICT, which is also aligned to the SDG 9, which is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. 5 outcomes, 100% on this pillar. What to expect in HPP2 in terms of its recommendation is a 100% broadband to allow for e-learning and e-health. Operationalize universal access and service fund. Regulations in licensing for community network be adaptable for realities. Consider TV white space as an alternative to connectivity. Approve open access guideline, promote e-service and innovation, increase uptake of broadband in schools, pass the data protection bill, and finally the cyber crime bill should set clear standard, pardon me for that, clear target on public awareness and education of electronic crime. What also stood out as rapporteurs for us was the cross-cutting recommendations. Based on the pillar score, out of the 15 desired outcome, 10 are on target with 5 remaining behind target. Potential pitfalls is assets and management of the 10 billion is poor. Shortcomings from HPP1 stems from limited funding. Youth are excluded from mainstream infrastructure pillar. Construction sector is not regulated and procurement is not utilized. Taking cognizance of the climate change and COVID-19 and monetary as a risk of the program not working out in time. Integration options, public procurements, and ring fence project for youth, Namibia's using the Procurement Act. The HPPII financing for project plus procure key commercial assets using public-private partnership. Sustainable venture capital, with established venture capital program to incubate emerging enterprise. Mentorship by developing a dedicated program to ensure graduates have work, and this also includes internship. Steps to consider: establish a task force, re-fencing projects for youth-owned businesses using the Procurement Act, embed a mentorship program, establish venture capital, of course, youth participation in the HPPII. The crossroad, of course, strength, youth already included in the economic advancement pillar. That is the strength. The weakness is youth excluded out of the mainstream infrastructure activity. And then, of course, what is seen, it looks like this is a SWOT analysis. What it's seen here, it's an opportunity development of an HPP2, an opportunity to grow into other pillars. And then what is also seen as a threat here is the COVID-19 eroded economic giants, and then corruptions and greed. Quickly to accelerate on the moderated discussions. On water, what kind of target was it based on? Was the 100% really under target? Is it possible for mining, fishing industry as part of the corporate social responsibility? Is it possible to build affordable housing, schools, and schools to take away some pressure from government? That came out very strongly there. It will be important to add another word to the infrastructure pillar and name it infrastructure development management. Need for entire government assets to be audited. more capacity to be given at the Ministry of Works, define dividends in what we really want to see and in measure. It was observed that so many people have access to clean water and electricity in rural area. And then, of course, the youth companies investing in solar energy, will it cause conflict of interest with the REITs? I think here the participant was actually asking that question. And when there is an issue like power outrage, they could be added value chain by making sure they are energy saving companies available at all times. We will not conclude without touching base on the Q&A as well as the chat room. In summaries, what is the update about looking, okay, let me say it again. What is the update about looking reached 100% bandwidth here? I think it's on the connectivity. Participant ask a question on energy. Energy imports estimates stand at 310 megawatt. What is the cost estimate to incur in increasing rural electricity, rural energy, pardon me, production in order to overcome these deficits? Another question was, are any issue or ideas raised here going to see any sort of implementation or support from the cabinet? And then, of course, a recommendation came through for infrastructure development programs to integrate economic zone. Question, do we have sport infrastructure and sport development in HPP2 or even in HPP1? And then, of course, is it possible to focus spending of ICT on high school, emphasis on to be ready to enter the workplace while rolling out to primary school? Also, is there a measurement matrix in place to measure one's ICT implemented and how it impact on school communities? And finally, under the Q&A, does government have a better plan to offer electricity to informal areas, or are they part of the 64% covered in electricity? Here, emphasis is on the informal settlement, because what was also spoken and during this discussion was the 34% of the electricity missing. And then concluding as rapporteurs from the chat room. Key salient point, government pushes for implementations of all solutions, plus people must be held accountable. Each of the sub-pillars of the HPP2 competent private sector individual appointed from OMAS reporting progress on quarterly basis. No progress, they should be reported to the President Office for further action. A citizen-driven government where taxpayers hold those responsible for ensuring development accountable. Same participant, will this be something the government will be able to consider? How will government ensure implementations, and what mechanism will be put in place to make sure those do not deliver are held accountable? Comment on energy sector in Africa. The sector is capital intensive, full of ancestors who have taken a sustainability in backseat. On agriculture, human economic development, does government have a strategy to launch pilot projects in rural area to develop integrated agriculture program that can replicate if necessary? Same participant, major challenge in rural area is lack of ability to mentally to effectively implement projects that will empower them, enable them, improve their well-being, health, and education. It's a question. And then, of course, integrated agri-human development, agri-ability, and mentoring with access to market, as well as the product development. And then we are almost concluding. Recommendations to have small scale project for the youth. And then, of course, utility cost was noted very high and unsustainable, especially on the electricity. And then finally, from the rapporteurs, recommendation on the ICT, diversifying infrastructure by demarcations between active and passive infrastructure. From myself, Inamuvua Munyama and Dabandula Nangolo, we are submitting our summary. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Munyama, for that very comprehensive summary of today's session. I do not for a minute envy you your job. It was quite a lot to take in, and I think you and your team did a stellar job at that. This is also where my job ends for today's session. I would like to hand over the driving seat to Ms. Desiree Matias to then do the concluding remarks. But I do want to thank all the participants that really stuck it through with us. We do apologize. We did not stick to the time as we did say we're going to, but as you've heard and you've been listening, there was just so much to say. Our panelists had so much to share, and it could not really be done in a very short time. But I think we managed to pull out the essence of what would, at the end of the day, contribute to HPP2. I would also like to acknowledge those that are watching us on Facebook, as we are live and the session is being recorded. I'm sure you can engage Ms. Desiree's office to get copies of the recordings or links if you'd like to have a look at it later on after the session. But with that said, I would like to say thank you so much. You've all been a wonderful audience. My name is Raquel Andreas, and this is where I say goodbye. Ms. Matias, the opportunity is yours.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you to our repertoire for that meticulous record. This brings us to the end of our fifth pillar for review and consultation. It has been a week-long marathon, but you made it to the end, and we're so grateful that you could walk this journey with us. Every single contribution, every single chat, question, and on the floor submission has been recorded, and we're going to go through the process of synthesis and, as far as possible, onboard your recommendations to inform the drafting. Where we are now is I want to confirm that our thinking is aligned. A lot of the issues that you have placed emphasis here today are really the relevant and the key issues that need to be addressed during the second term. You've also brought in fresh perspective. You've also brought in new thinking. You've placed emphasis on certain areas that needed to be emphasized, and we appreciate that. Well, what will happen next, and I have a couple of announcements to share with you, is that we are not going to have the validation workshop this week, Wednesday, as initially committed. And the reason for that is because I did indicate at the beginning that we're running a parallel consultation process. We have completed the youth consultations, but there are other colleagues who are also running consultations with different sectors. And the objective of a validation workshop is really to seek consensus on the framework once it has been formulated. We are currently drafting the pillars according to the feedback and the reviews that we have been conducting. And Wednesday the 30th is seemingly too soon for a group validation. It would be okay for us to validate as youth, but we don't only want to have a single sector validation, we want to have a broad stakeholder validation as one single exercise. So we will extend an invitation to our speakers, presenters, moderators, participants, probably by the early week of October, for us to conduct this validation. Our delivery timelines, in the interest of transparency, is that we are looking to have this plan launched in the third quarter, that is the government financial quarter of this year, 2020, of this financial year. So towards the end of October 2020. So keep an eye out on our social media channels and all our different accounts where we communicate with you, but we will also provide all the presentations and all the video records from today and the preceding session, so that you will have the basis on which to validate against of what has been presented. In conclusion, I want to just affirm that this has not just been a talk show. And there has been some concerns raised that we are aware from the public that, you know, we do a lot of good planning, but really what matters is the tangible improvements that come from implementation. The objective is tangible improvements and delivery on these commitments, but planning is foundational. It's the first step for you to allocate the resources properly so that you can achieve the impact that you want to achieve. And we think that by putting heads together, we will have properly aligned those priorities so that we can see the type of results that would result in improved quality livelihoods for our fellow countrymen and women. So we have met the opportunity, you have invested the time, but it was also an obligation for us as citizens to form part of this process. So again, I just want to say thank you for making that investment. A little bit of homework is that we want to give this agenda a name. We want to call our aspiration by something that we can identify with. So if you have any suggestions, whether it's a name or a word or a catchy phrase or a slogan or a powerful hashtag, if you have any idea of what we should call our Common Youth Agenda for 2020 to 2025, drop us a line, tweet us, DM us, email us, WhatsApp us. I think we're quite accessible to all of you. And let us know what you're thinking. It's incentivized, so there'll be recognition for the name that is eventually selected. Thank you very much again to my team, the repertoires, the digital colleagues, the technical colleagues, to the presenters for that preparation. You've guided the conversation very well. Thank you to our able moderator. There are a lot of government officials on the call. Thank you for sitting and listening in. And I think we have achieved the intended purpose. My final remark, I think, to fellow young Namibians is just to encourage you. We understand the times we're in, and we know that it's a difficult time for all of us, but be strong and remain positive. Our president during the State of the Nation address said that our true character is only revealed during times of crisis. And during this time of crisis, it's an opportunity for us to really repurpose ourselves to meet the opportunities that the future is going to present for us. This is our opportunity and we will overcome. Let us continue to hold hands and to build Namibia, to shape Namibia together. This is the only country, after all, that we can call our home. Thank you. I will allow you now to have your lunch. Let me not stand between you and lunch hour. We will remain in touch via our digital channels. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.